It was very scary when Saudi Arabia killed 37 people in one day in a mass execution in 2019. Mujtaba al-Swaikat's story was one of the most heartbreaking ones. Even more disturbing is the fact that he was tortured horribly before he met his tragic end. He was arrested as a teenager. Here are some of the most upsetting executions from death row around the world. In 1977, Oklahoma became the first state to use lethal injection. People thought it was a better way to punish people than older methods like hanging, firing squads, or the electric chair. The plan was simple. A mix of drugs would be injected into a vein to knock the person out, paralyze them, and then kill them. Now, the procedure uses 3 drugs: an anesthetic to knock out the prisoner, a paralytic to stop his or her muscles from moving, and a cardioverter to stop the heart. But in real life, things that sound clinical and simple on paper aren't always that way. On April 29, 2014, in Oklahoma, one of the scariest things that could have happened. Clayton Lockett was going to be put to death for kidnapping and killing Stephanie Neiman. But because of a mistake, that execution turned into a nightmare. It was not done correctly when the intravenous line was put in, so the drugs got into the surrounding tissue instead of his bloodstream. So, he woke up after the procedure had already started, writhing, grunting, and clearly struggling. Witnesses say this is a terrible and chaotic scene. What was supposed to be a few minutes of pain went on for 43 agonizing minutes before Lockett finally died of a heart attack. This caused outrage around the world and brought up old arguments about whether or not lethal injection is moral or humane. Supporters say that it may be the only way to get justice done, but critics wonder if these processes can ever be completely free of pain or mistakes. The Clayton Lockett case is a scary reminder that even the newest ways of putting people to death can fail in shocking and upsetting ways that affect both the prisoners and the people who saw the execution for a long time. The history of electrocution, or the electric chair, is longer and more controversial than the history of the lethal injection. It was first used as an alternative to hanging when it was first created in the late 1800s. William Kemmler was the first person to be put to death in an electric chair. It happened in New York in 1890. The idea for the method came from a competition between Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse. Edison was pushing the use of alternating current AC electricity to show how dangerous it is. In a strange way, this search for more humane ways to kill people led to the creation of one of the most horrifying ways to kill someone ever. A person is put to death by electrical current by being strapped to a wooden chair and having electrodes attached to their head and feet. Then, a high-voltage electrical current is sent through the body, which should stop the heart and kill the person right away. Since it was used so much in the 20th century, the United States is the country most associated with electrocution. Some states still offer the electric chair as an option, and a few of them keep it as a backup method, even though lethal injection is now the most common way to kill someone. This is supposed to be quick and not too painful, but electrocution has often been anything but that. One of the most well-known events happened in Florida on July 8, 1999, when Alan Lee Davis was being put to death. This man was found guilty of killing a pregnant woman and her 2 children and was given the electric chair death sentence. His execution, on the other hand, went horribly wrong. As the current went through his body, disturbing things happened. Blood poured out of his nose, his face turned bright red, and his head and legs got burned. People later called him Bloody Alan because of how horribly he died. His case sparked arguments about whether electrocution was a cruel and unusual punishment. Graphic pictures of his death were leaked, which caused a lot of anger and legal challenges. But even though it isn't used as much as it used to be, the electric chair still stands for the dark and complicated side of capital punishment. Critics often say that methods like electrocution don't always live up to the humane standard they were made to uphold, even when the crimes are very bad. For many of its fans, it's still a stark reminder of how justice is done, but at what cost to society's sense of right and wrong? There are many ways to be put to death around the world, but hanging is one of the oldest. It has been done for thousands of years. Because it is so easy, it has been used to punish people for crimes, ranging from theft to treason in many cultures. During the Middle Ages, people were often hung in public squares as a scary warning. The process is pretty easy. Hang the person by the neck with the goal of either breaking their neck or suffocating them to death quickly. The UK was historically linked to hanging because it was the main way people were put to death until 1964. But in modern times, countries like Iran have done this all the time, which is very disturbing. Iran has the most hangings of any country in the world. These hangings are often done in public, which shows that they are still used as a legal and symbolic punishment. Hanging is supposed to be useful, but it hasn't always been that way. One of the most disturbing events happened in England on July 13, 1955, when Ruth Ellis was put to death. Ellis was the last woman in the UK to be hanged. She was found guilty of killing her lover, David Blakely, out of love. Ellis was led to the gallows at Holloway Prison, where he was put to death. Even more sad than the way it was done is how people have responded to it. Ellis was a young mother, and many people thought that her crime was proof that she was desperate because she was in an abusive relationship. People felt so strongly about her death penalty that it led to heated arguments about whether it was moral or not. The way she stood calmly at the gallows made a scary impression, and her death sparked change. Then there were cases where hangings went wrong, which made the process take a long time. A drop that is too short can slowly choke someone to death, while one that is too long can cut off their head, showing how flawed the method is. So, even though hanging is still used in India and Japan and other places, its violent history still makes us think deeply about what is right and wrong. Is this ever a real way to do justice? Cases like Ruth Ellis's make us think about the people who are killed on the gallows and start conversations that continue to shape how people think about the death penalty. As early as the 1400s, the firing squad was a common way to put people to death for crimes against the military and high treason. This method comes from the need to quickly and effectively kill enemies during wartime. It involves a group of shooters aiming at the condemned person or prisoner, usually at the heart, to make sure they die quickly from blood loss or organ failure. For hundreds of years, people liked it because it was simple and seemed dignified. The condemned were given a chance to face their deaths standing up, often with their eyes covered. The United States, especially Utah, is one of the few modern countries that still uses the firing squad for low-level crimes. Even though it wasn't used very often, Utah kept this option open because they saw it as a way to honor the wishes of some prisoners or avoid arguments about the morality of other methods, like the lethal injection. People around the world often associate North Korea with executions by firing squad, which are used as a harsh form of punishment rather than formal justice. But even though it seems pretty simple, the firing squad has a long history of botched executions. One of the scariest things ever happened on March 23, 1960. during the execution of Gary Gilmore, who was found guilty of killing a gas station attendant and a motel clerk. The execution took place in Utah. Gilmore chose to be put to death by a firing squad. Even though he was killed quickly, 5 people shot at him at the same time, and at least 1 bullet hit him in the heart. It is the events that led to his death that made it so famous. Gilmore's execution was the first one in the US in almost 10 years, since the death penalty had been put on hold for a short time. His case would lead people all over the country to argue about whether or not the death penalty is moral and necessary. However, what makes the firing squad so scary is that it hurts both the people who are being executed and the people who are putting them down. Usually, only 1 rifle is loaded with live bullets, while the others fire blanks. This is done so that the executioners don't know who actually fired the fatal shot, which is meant to keep them calm but brings up serious moral questions. Now, a lot of supporters say that the firing squad is faster and less likely to fail than other methods, like lethal injection. But critics are quick to point out that it is violent and old-fashioned by nature. The horrible picture of someone standing against a wall, ready to be shot, is still one of the scariest images of the death penalty. The gas chamber method, which came about in the early 1900s, was created as a more modern alternative to hanging or electrocuting. So, the first known use of lethal gas was in Nevada in 1924, when G. John, a murder suspect, was the first person to die from it. Now, the method was meant to be more humane. It used cyanide gas to knock people out and kill them by stopping their breathing. The prisoner would be locked in a room with no airflow, and the deadly fumes would be released by a chemical reaction that usually involved sodium cyanide and sulfuric acid. After all these years, the US is most often linked to the gas chamber, which was common in states like California and Mississippi in the 1980s. Lethal injection has mostly taken the place of the gas chamber, but some states still offer it as an option. Though this was supposed to be a less painful way to die, the fact that the gas chamber is so well known shows that it's not. We have a very scary case from April 6, 1992, when Donald Eugene Harding was being put to death in Arizona. After being found guilty of killing 2 men, Harding was put to death, which many witnesses said was long and painful. As soon as the cyanide was let out, Harding started gasping for air. His body started shaking violently, and as he fought against his restraints, his face turned red with pain. People who were there said it took him more than 10 minutes to pass out, and his labored breathing could be heard throughout the execution chamber. A lot of people who saw the disturbing scene left the room in shock. People were very angry about how cruel the gas chamber was after Harding was put to death. Critics said the method caused a lot of physical pain. Prisoners would often be awake for several minutes, while their lungs burned and were in unbearable pain. These days, the gas chamber is almost useless and is only used in a few states. But people will always remember its scary past and events like the execution of Donald Harding. Stoning is one of the oldest and cruelest ways to kill someone, and it is usually done for adultery, blasphemy, or other crimes that people think are wrong. It's pretty easy. A group of people throw stones at someone who is guilty until they die. This is especially horrifying because it happens slowly and painfully, and the stones are purposely chosen to be small enough to make the pain last longer, but big enough to be very painful. The practice of stoning has its roots in old laws from places like the Middle East and North Africa. It's talked about in religious texts like the Bible and the Quran, but different people have very different ideas about why it's necessary. Today, stoning is still legal in some places, but it's mostly associated with Iran, where it's still done, sometimes even though the whole world is against it. In fact, Iran's penal code spells out the process very clearly. Men are buried up to their waists and women up to their chests before they are put to death. This makes sure they can't get away. In 2004, terrible things happened in Mecca, Iran, when people were stoned. A woman named Atefe Sahaleh was put to death for allegedly breaking the rules of chastity. Her terrible case became a worldwide symbol of how cruel this punishment is. There were major problems with the law during Atefe's trial. For example, the judge was said to have made personal judgments about her behavior. The poor girl was buried up to her chest, and as stones fell on her weak body, loud jeers drowned out her cries. A lot of people around the world spoke out against the execution, saying that stoning is cruel and that justice was clearly not done. The fact that stoning is still done shows that there is a troubling conflict between old customs and modern human rights standards. Some changes have been made because of pressure from other countries, like unofficial bans in a few countries, but supporters say that a lot more needs to be done to get rid of it completely. Being beheaded, or chopping your head off, as some people may know it, has long been a horrifying and interesting way to kill someone. In the past, this type of capital punishment was seen as a quick and honorable way to kill someone important. But because it is so violent and graphic, it has also become a sign of fear and absolute power. If you look at it, beheading has been done for thousands of years and was common in Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome, among other places. In the Middle Ages, it was a common way to punish crimes like betrayal, treason, and even adultery. In Europe, they used to cut it off with a sword or an axe. But during the French Revolution, the guillotine became famous and made the job very quick and painful. These days, Saudi Arabia is linked to beheading as a way to kill someone. Based on how the country interprets Sharia law, it's used for crimes like murder, drug trafficking, and leaving the faith. People are often put to death in public to serve as a warning and a stark reminder of what will happen if they break the law. In 2019, one of the worst things that could have happened in Saudi Arabia. There was a mass execution where 37 people were killed in one day. Mujtaba al-Swaikat's death was one of the saddest. When Mujtaba was a teenager, he was arrested for taking part in anti-government protests. He was accused of spreading chaos and was tortured badly before he had to confess. Even though people from all over the world asked for his release, his execution went ahead. This method is cruel, not only because it hurts people physically, but also because it hurts them mentally. The point of public executions is to make people afraid and obedient by making justice a public show. The case of Mujtaba was strongly criticized around the world, and it led to discussions about human rights and the moral duties of countries that work with Saudi Arabia. While losing your head as a way to be executed has a history, the fact that it is still used today brings up important moral questions. People who support it say it keeps people from doing bad things, but people who are against it say it is often used in cruel and unfair ways. Beating someone to death by boiling them alive has to be one of the worst ways to kill someone in history. The condemned would be put into a large pot or cauldron of boiling liquid, like water, oil, or even molten metal. As their body burned from the outside in, they would be in unbearable pain. The harsh punishment was meant to cause the most pain and serve as a warning to anyone who breaks the law. The roots can be traced back to very old times. In Mesopotamia, people who were found guilty of horrible crimes were put through this horrible process. During the Middle Ages, it became well known in Europe, especially in England, during the rule of King Henry VIII. Poisoning was punished by being boiled alive in 1531 after the case of Richard Roos, a cook who put poison in the bishop's porridge. Rose was boiled alive in public as a scary show to show other people what would happen if they tried the same thing. In the past, boiling people alive wasn't just done in Europe. In some parts of Asia, like Japan during the Sengoku period, criminals and prisoners of war were boiled alive. But no country used it regularly because it's pretty gross and would often make people sick, even in times when punishments were very harsh. But one of the most well-known events happened in Uzbekistan in the late 1990s, when Islam Karimov was in charge. A political prisoner named Muzaffar Avazov was tortured and then put in boiling water because he was thought to be a member of a banned Islamic group. That wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was also a clear example of cruelty done by the government. When his body was given back to his family, it was clear that he had been burned and scalded, which led to condemnation around the world. Boiling became less common over time as societies changed and looked for more humane ways to kill people. But its dark history lives on as a reminder of how cruel justice systems can become. And now, for something that will shock you, death flights are some of the most horrifying and secret ways to put people to death. As you can see, people are being thrown from planes, helicopters, and other aircraft into large bodies of water or even into remote wilderness areas, often while they are still alive. This way of executing someone isn't just meant to end their life, it's meant to erase them completely, leaving no trace. During the Dirty War in Argentina, from 1976 to 1983, this hideous practice became well known. Death flights were used by the military dictatorship to get rid of political opponents, students, journalists, and anyone else thought to be against the regime. People were often given drugs or tied down and then put on an aeroplane under the guise of being sent to detention centers. They were thrown out over the Atlantic Ocean or even the Rio de la Plata once they were in the air. This made sure that no bodies would be found, which kept families from getting closure. Death flights are most often linked to Argentina, but they have also happened in other places, like Chile under Augusto Pinochet and Indonesia during the anti-communist purges. The case of Argentine journalist Rodolfo Walsh, who is known for reporting on violations of human rights, is one of the scariest ones we have. Walsh was last seen in 1977. He may have been taken to a detention center and then put on a death flight, according to evidence. Like thousands of others, his body was never found. These horrible crimes happened all over Argentina on a huge scale. A rough guess is that up to 30,000 people went missing during the Dirty War. A lot of these people died on death flights. Later, people who had been in detention centers talked about the horrifying process. They said that prisoners were told they were going to be freed, but then they were sedated, chained, and thrown to their deaths. By making people disappear without a trace, these death flights were meant to make a lot of people scared. The regime wanted to silence anyone who spoke out against it and make everyone afraid. Death flights are a very cruel way to kill people, but they also show how strong people were, who fought for justice despite impossible odds. It's likely that Jesus Christ is the first person who comes to mind when you hear the word crucifixion, even if you're not religious. Well, the crucifixion is one of the most famous ways to kill someone because it is so cruel and has so much meaning. People who are guilty are nailed or tied to a wooden cross and left to hang there until they die, which could take hours or even days. This way of killing someone is unbearably painful because the body weight puts too much stress on the limbs and chest, which eventually causes asphyxiation. In history, people from times past like the Persians, the Carthaginians, and most famously the Romans used the crucifixion. People would be embarrassed in public, which is meant to discourage others from disobeying authority. Before being nailed to the cross, the victim was often paraded through the street, which made the punishment as much about controlling the person's mind as it was about hurting them physically. Crucifixion is not used very often these days, but it is still a legal punishment in Saudi Arabia under certain interpretations of Sharia law. It is usually only used for serious crimes like murder or acts of terror. It is used as a symbol, with the body being put on a cross after the execution. But sometimes, the crucifixion itself happens, which is strongly condemned around the world. Most people know about Jesus Christ's crucifixion, which took place in Judea while it was ruled by the Romans between 30 and 33 AD. But in 2019, something shocking happened in Saudi Arabia that shocked the whole world. A man named Abdul Karim al-Banawi was put to death and crucified because he was accused of murder and armed robbery. His body was put on a cross in public to serve as a warning to others. That got a lot of negative feedback from human rights groups, who pointed out how cruel the method was and how it fits in with modern society. For hundreds of years, the crucifixion has been a powerful symbol, both for its brutality and for its deep religious and cultural meaning. For Christians, Jesus' death on the cross is the ultimate sacrifice and redemption. For some, it's still a stark reminder of how cruel people can be. Crucifixion is painful, not only because it hurts physically, but also because it makes people look bad in public. The victims are stripped of their honor and left out in the open for everyone to see. This is a punishment that is meant to break both the body and the spirit. The crucifixion is mostly a thing of the past now, but it is still used sometimes in modern times to show how justice, cultural traditions, and changing human rights standards can clash. This sad history continues to make people argue and think about the morality of punishment in general. That's it for today's video. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the bell so you're first to know when a new video drops. Until next time, stay sharp and stay safe.